If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge, and when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. Chapter 1: Origins of an Empire. Part 1: The Computer Revolution Beckons. In January 1975, a magazine cover changed everything for two young men in Boston. Bill Gates, barely 19 and studying at Harvard, spotted the latest issue of Popular Electronics in Harvard Square. The cover showed a peculiar metal box with switches and lights, claiming to be the world's first mini-computer kit available to everyone. The Altair 8800 looked more like a radio than what people imagined computers should be, but it represented something revolutionary. Gates rushed to find his childhood friend Paul Allen, who was working nearby at Honeywell. When Allen saw the magazine, his eyes lit up immediately. Both had been obsessed with computers since their teenage years at Lakeside School in Seattle, where they had spent countless hours programming on the school's terminal. They had dreamed of a day when computers would be small enough and cheap enough for regular people to own. That day had suddenly arrived. The Altair cost just $439 as a kit, a fraction of what mainframe computers cost. However, it came with a significant problem. The machine could only understand machine language consisting of ones and zeros that users had to input through tiny switches on the front panel. Programming it meant flipping hundreds of switches in precise sequences, making it nearly impossible for ordinary people to use. Allen and Gates saw the opportunity immediately. Every computer needed software to be useful, yet almost everyone in the industry focused on building better hardware. The two friends realized that someone needed to create programming languages that would make these new machines accessible to regular users. They had the skills to build exactly what the Altair needed. The timing felt perfect. Both had been programming since high school and had already started a small business called Trafo Data, which used computers to analyze traffic patterns. They understood both the technical challenges and the business potential of software development. The computer revolution was beginning, and they wanted to be part of it from the ground floor. Most established companies dismissed these small computers as toys for hobbyists. IBM and other giants focused on room-sized machines that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. This dismissive attitude created an opening for young entrepreneurs willing to take the new technology seriously. Gates felt torn between his Harvard education and this unexpected opportunity. Allen, however, was ready to take risks. He had been working in traditional computing, but dreamed of something bigger. The Altair represented their chance to shape the future of computing, rather than just participate in it. The more they discussed the possibilities, the more excited they became. Personal computers would need operating systems, programming languages, and applications. An entire software industry was waiting to be born, and they possessed the technical knowledge to help create it. Part 2: Code Before Hardware, the birth of Microsoft Allen. Their excitement about the Altair was one thing, but actually doing something about it was another challenge entirely. Gates and Allen faced a peculiar problem that would define their entire approach to business. They wanted to create software for the Altair 8800, but they didn't have the machine itself. The computer cost thousands of dollars, money they simply didn't have as college students and young professionals. Most people would have waited to get their hands on the actual hardware before attempting to write software for it. Gates and Allen chose a different path. They decided to build their basic programming language for the Altair without ever touching the machine. This was like learning to drive by studying a car manual without ever sitting behind the wheel. Allen spent countless hours studying the technical specifications of the Intel 8080 processor that powered the Altair. He created a simulator program on Harvard's computer systems that could mimic how the Altair would behave. This allowed them to test their code without the actual machine. It was risky and unconventional, but it was also brilliant. Working mostly at night in Harvard's computer lab, Gates wrote the basic interpreter line by line. He had to make every byte count because the Altair had extremely limited memory. The code needed to be efficient and compact. Gates became obsessed with optimization, a trait that would define Microsoft's approach for decades. Meanwhile, Allen contacted MIT, the company that made the Altair. He boldly claimed they had a basic interpreter ready for demonstration. This was a calculated gamble. They had code, but they had never tested it on the actual machine. Ed Roberts, the founder of MIT, was intrigued enough to invite them for a demonstration. The moment of truth came when Allen flew to Albuquerque with their untested software loaded on a paper tape. When he fed the tape into the Altair, everyone held their breath. The machine came to life, and their basic interpreter worked perfectly. It was a stunning success that validated their remote development approach. This demonstration led to Microsoft's first major contract. MIT agreed to license their basic interpreter, giving Gates and Allen their first taste of real business success. They formalized their partnership and named their company Microsoft, with a hyphen that would later disappear. Their success with the Altair Basic proved a fundamental insight that would guide their entire career. While others focused on building better hardware, Gates and Allen realized that software was the real key to making computers useful. Hardware was just the foundation. Software was what made machines come alive and serve human needs. This approach of developing software ahead of widespread hardware adoption would become Microsoft's signature strategy, positioning them perfectly for the personal computer revolution that was about to sweep the world. Part 3. Building in Albuquerque, a startup takes shape. The desert heat of Albuquerque greeted Gates and Allen as they arrived in New Mexico during the summer of 1975. Their success with the Altair Basic had earned them a contract, but now they faced a completely different challenge. Moving from the familiar confines of Harvard and Seattle to this southwestern city meant transforming from weekend programmers into full-time business owners. The MIT's headquarters sat like a modest oasis in the desert landscape. Ed Roberts, the company's founder, welcomed the young duo, but made it clear that proximity mattered. If Microsoft wanted to maintain its partnership with MIT's, Gates and Allen needed to be close enough to collaborate daily. The message was simple: pack up and move to Albuquerque, or risk losing their breakthrough opportunity. Gates made perhaps the most significant decision of his young life. He dropped out of Harvard, leaving behind a prestigious path that his parents had carefully planned. The move shocked his family, but Gates saw something his parents couldn't yet grasp. The personal computer industry was about to explode, and he refused to watch from the sidelines of a college dormitory. Their first office was nothing glamorous. A small space near MIT's headquarters became the birthplace of Microsoft's corporate culture. Allen handled much of the technical development while Gates focused on the business side, though both worked on everything from coding to customer support. The company operated on a shoestring budget, with every dollar carefully counted and every decision scrutinized. Finding employees proved more challenging than expected. Albuquerque wasn't exactly a magnet for top programming talent, and the two founders had to get creative. They reached out to old friends from high school and college, convincing them to take a leap of faith on this unknown company in an unfamiliar city. These early hires became the foundation of Microsoft's workforce, bringing enthusiasm that compensated for their lack of corporate experience. The work was intense and demanding. Days stretched long as the small team refined their basic interpreter and developed new versions for different computer systems. Every bug fix and feature addition required careful testing, often done manually since automated testing tools barely existed. The office buzzed with the constant chatter of programmers solving problems and debating solutions. Gates demonstrated an early talent for business negotiations that surprised even Allen. When other computer manufacturers approached Microsoft about licensing BASIC for their machines, Gates drove hard bargains that maximized revenue while building strategic relationships. He understood that each new partnership expanded Microsoft's reach and established the company as a serious player in the emerging software market. The Albuquerque period taught both founders crucial lessons about running a business. They learned to balance technical excellence with commercial viability, ensuring their products not only worked well, but also met market demands. This experience shaped Microsoft's approach to product development, emphasizing both innovation and practical business considerations. As 1976 progressed, the limitations of their desert location became increasingly apparent. Recruiting talent remained difficult, and the isolation from other technology companies hindered their growth potential. The foundation they built in Albuquerque was solid, but Gates and Allen began to realize they needed a different environment to achieve their expanding ambitions. Part 4. Searching for Talent. The move to Bellevue. By late 1976, the small team in Albuquerque faced a growing problem. While they had built a solid foundation and learned valuable business lessons, finding skilled programmers in the New Mexico desert proved nearly impossible. The isolation that once seemed manageable now felt like a barrier to their dreams. Bill Gates and Paul Allen spent countless evenings discussing their dilemma. They needed talented people to help them grow, but talented software developers simply weren't flocking to Albuquerque. The answer came naturally. Both founders had roots in the Pacific Northwest, and Seattle's emerging technology scene offered something Albuquerque couldn't: access to brilliant minds. The University of Washington was graduating computer science students, and other tech companies were beginning to establish themselves in the region. Gates, with his Harvard connections and business instincts, recognized that location mattered as much as product quality in building a technology company. The decision to move wasn't taken lightly. Leaving MITS behind meant cutting ties with their first major client and striking out entirely on their own. But by early 1977, they had made their choice. The company relocated to Bellevue, Washington, a suburb east of Seattle that offered lower rent than the city itself, while keeping them close to the growing tech community. The move immediately paid dividends. Within months, Microsoft began attracting the kind of talent they had desperately needed. Young programmers, fresh from universities and eager to work on cutting-edge software, started joining the team. The company culture began to shift from a small group of friends working together to a more structured organization with distinct roles and responsibilities. Gates proved particularly skilled at identifying and recruiting exceptional programmers. He looked for people who shared his intensity and perfectionism, individuals who could work long hours and think creatively about software problems. The Pacific Northwest's relaxed atmosphere attracted many California refugees seeking a different pace of life while still working on exciting technology projects. The Bellevue office buzzed with energy as new projects took shape. Having access to a larger talent pool meant Microsoft could take on more complex challenges and develop multiple products simultaneously. The company's reputation began spreading through the tight-knit programming community, making recruitment easier with each passing month. This strategic relocation marked a turning point in Microsoft's evolution. No longer were they dependent on a single location or limited by geographical constraints. The move to Bellevue demonstrated Gates and Allen's understanding that success required more than just good software. It demanded access to the right people in the right environment. With a growing team of skilled developers and proximity to other technology companies, Microsoft was positioning itself to compete on a much larger stage. The foundation was now in place for the major contracts and partnerships that would define their next phase of growth. Part 5. First contracts and early growth. With their new Bellevue headquarters established and a growing team of talented programmers, Gates and Allen faced their next challenge: proving Microsoft could deliver software solutions beyond their initial BASIC interpreter. The computer industry was expanding rapidly, but most companies still viewed software as an afterthought to hardware sales. Their breakthrough came when hardware manufacturers began reaching out directly. These companies had witnessed Microsoft's success with the Altair BASIC and recognized that software could differentiate their products in an increasingly crowded market. Gates, barely in his 20s, found himself negotiating contracts worth tens of thousands of dollars with established technology firms. The first major deal arrived from General Electric, which needed a customized version of BASIC for their new computer systems. Gates and his team worked tirelessly to adapt their existing code, learning valuable lessons about enterprise software requirements. The contract not only brought in crucial revenue, but also established Microsoft's reputation as a reliable software partner for major corporations. Word spread quickly through the tight-knit computer industry. Soon, companies like Texas Instruments and Commodore were knocking on Microsoft's door, each with specific software needs. Gates proved himself a shrewd negotiator, securing licensing deals that allowed Microsoft to retain ownership of their core technologies while customizing solutions for different hardware platforms. These early partnerships taught Microsoft an important lesson about scalability. Rather than creating entirely new software for each client, they developed a strategy of building flexible, adaptable core products that could be modified for various systems. This approach dramatically reduced development time while maximizing revenue potential from each piece of software they created. Revenue began flowing in steadily, allowing Microsoft to hire additional programmers and invest in better development tools. The company's monthly income grew from hundreds to thousands of dollars, providing the financial stability needed for long-term planning. Gates meticulously tracked every contract and payment, building the financial discipline that would characterize Microsoft throughout its growth. The hardware manufacturers weren't just buying software, they were validating Microsoft's business model. Each successful contract demonstrated that software could be a profitable standalone product rather than simply a free addition to hardware sales. This validation attracted attention from industry observers and potential investors who began viewing Microsoft as a serious technology company. Perhaps most importantly, these early contracts established Microsoft's reputation for reliability and technical excellence. Hardware companies needed partners they could trust to deliver working software on schedule, and Microsoft consistently met these expectations. This track record became their calling card when approaching new clients. As 1978 approached, Microsoft had transformed from a two-person startup into a legitimate software company with multiple revenue streams and a growing client base. The foundation they had built through these early contracts would soon attract the attention of a much larger player in the computer industry, setting the stage for the partnership that would change everything. Chapter 2: Seizing the Software Crown. Part 1: IBM's Call, the MS-DOS Gamble. In 1980, IBM executives faced a problem that would change computing forever. The tech giant needed an operating system for their new personal computer project, and they needed it fast. IBM had always built everything in-house, but this time they decided to look outside their walls. Their first stop was Digital Research, the company behind CP/M, the leading operating system of the day. But talks fell apart over contract terms and business philosophy. That's when IBM turned to a small software company in Seattle called Microsoft. Bill Gates and Paul Allen had built their reputation writing programming languages, not operating systems. When IBM came knocking, Microsoft didn't even have an operating system to sell. But Gates saw the opportunity of a lifetime and said yes anyway. The clock was ticking. IBM wanted to launch their PC within a year, an impossibly tight schedule by industry standards. Gates knew he couldn't build an operating system from scratch in time, so he made a bold move that would define Microsoft's future. He approached Seattle Computer Products, a local company that had created QDOS, the quick and dirty operating system, as a CP/M clone for their own hardware. Gates bought QDOS for $50,000 without telling Seattle Computer Products about the IBM deal. He then hired Tim Patterson, QDOS's creator, to help adapt the system for IBM specifications. Working around the clock, Microsoft's small team transformed QDOS into PC-DOS, tailored specifically for IBM's new machine. But Gates made one crucial decision that IBM's lawyers would later regret not challenging more forcefully. While IBM would own PC-DOS, Microsoft retained the rights to license the underlying system, which they called MS-DOS, to other computer manufacturers. IBM agreed, viewing Microsoft as just another supplier for what they assumed would be a niche market. The gamble paid off spectacularly. When the IBM PC launched in August 1981, it became an instant success. More importantly for Microsoft, other companies began creating IBM-compatible computers, and they all needed MS-DOS to run the same software. Each sale meant licensing revenue flowing back to Microsoft. Within 2 years, dozens of companies were building IBM clones, and Microsoft was collecting royalties from every single one. While IBM had expected to dominate the personal computer market they had created, they instead found themselves competing against their own standard. Microsoft had positioned itself as the common thread connecting an entire industry. The young company that had started in a garage was now at the center of the personal computer revolution. Gates had turned a desperate situation into Microsoft's greatest strategic advantage, proving that sometimes the biggest risks yield the most transformative rewards. Part 2. Licensing Masterstroke. Every PC, every home. Microsoft had discovered something more valuable than selling software copies. They had found the power of licensing. Instead of simply creating programs and selling them one by one, Gates and his team crafted a strategy that would change the entire software industry forever. The licensing model was brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than manufacturing and distributing physical products, Microsoft would allow computer makers to install MS-DOS on their machines for a fee. Each computer sold meant money flowing back to Microsoft, regardless of who built the hardware or where it was sold. This approach created a snowball effect across the industry. Computer manufacturers loved the arrangement because they could focus on building better machines without worrying about creating operating systems. Customers benefited because they could buy computers from different companies while still using familiar software. Microsoft profited from every transaction without manufacturing a single piece of hardware. The strategy transformed Microsoft from a small software company into the central hub of personal computing. Every time someone bought a computer from Compaq, Dell, or dozens of other manufacturers, Microsoft earned revenue. The company had positioned itself as the invisible foundation supporting an entire industry. Gates understood that controlling the software standard meant controlling the market. While hardware companies competed fiercely against each other, they all needed Microsoft's operating system to make their computers useful. This created a steady stream of income that grew with every computer sold worldwide. The licensing model also gave Microsoft tremendous leverage in negotiations. Computer manufacturers needed MS-DOS more than Microsoft needed any single manufacturer. This power dynamic allowed Microsoft to set favorable terms and maintain control over how their software was distributed and used. Competition struggled to match this approach. Other software companies were still thinking in terms of individual sales, while Microsoft had created a system that generated revenue from the entire industry's growth. The more popular personal computers became, the more money Microsoft made. The financial impact was staggering. Within a few years, licensing revenue had transformed Microsoft from a promising startup into one of the most profitable companies in technology. The model provided predictable income that funded research, development, and expansion into new markets. This licensing strategy also established Microsoft as the industry standard. When software developers created programs, they wrote them for MS-DOS because that's what most computers used. This created a cycle where Microsoft's dominance reinforced itself, making it even harder for competitors to gain ground. The success of this approach would soon attract attention from computer users who wanted something more than text-based commands. They wanted pictures, menus, and easier ways to interact with their machines. Microsoft was already working on the answer, and the licensing model would help them deliver it to every computer in the world. Part 3. Growing Ambitions, Rapid Expansion, and the Rise of Windows 4. By the early 1980s, Microsoft had built a solid foundation with MS-DOS, but Bill Gates and his team weren't content to rest on their success. They could see the future of computing changing before their eyes. While most people still typed commands into black screens with green text, researchers at places like Xerox were experimenting with something revolutionary. They had created computers that showed pictures, windows, and menus. Instead of memorizing complex commands, users could simply point and click with a mouse. Gates realized this graphical approach would transform how ordinary people used computers. MS-DOS had made Microsoft the king of business computing, but it still required users to learn technical commands. A secretary wanting to write a letter had to type cryptic instructions just to start a word processor. Gates knew that millions of potential computer users were intimidated by this complexity. If Microsoft could create an easy-to-use graphical system, they could bring computers to every home and office. The company began working on Windows in 1981, but the path proved far more difficult than anyone expected. Creating a graphical interface required enormous computing power, and most personal computers of the time barely had enough memory to run simple programs. The early development team struggled with crashes, slow performance, and frustrated users who complained that Windows made their computers nearly unusable. Microsoft faced fierce internal debates about Windows. Some engineers argued they should focus on improving MS-DOS instead of chasing this risky new technology. Others worried that Windows would cannibalize their profitable MS-DOS business. But Gates pushed forward, convinced that someone would eventually create a successful graphical interface, and he wanted Microsoft to get there first. The first version of Windows, released in 1985, disappointed many users. It was slow, crashed frequently, and offered few compelling advantages over MS-DOS. Critics called it a poor imitation of Apple's Macintosh system. Sales were modest, and some industry observers predicted Windows would fail entirely. But Microsoft kept refining the product. Windows 2.0 arrived in 1987 with better performance and improved features. More importantly, Microsoft leveraged their MS-DOS relationships to get computer manufacturers interested in Windows. Since most PC makers already worked with Microsoft, they were willing to test Windows on their machines. The breakthrough came with Windows 3.0 in 1990. This version finally delivered on the promise of easy-to-use computing. It ran smoothly on typical business computers and offered genuine advantages over command-line systems. Users could run multiple programs simultaneously, switch between them easily, and manage files by dragging icons instead of typing commands. Windows 3.0's success validated Gates' vision and positioned Microsoft to dominate the next era of computing. The company had successfully transformed from a developer of technical tools into a creator of mass-market software that anyone could use. Part 4. The Public Offering. Microsoft goes public. By 1985, Microsoft had grown from a two-person startup into a powerhouse with hundreds of employees and millions in revenue. Windows 3.0's success had proven that the company could create software that millions of people wanted to use. But growth required capital, and Bill Gates faced a crucial decision that would forever change Microsoft's future. The company needed money to expand internationally, develop new products, and compete with giants like IBM and Apple. Gates could seek private investors, but that would mean giving up control to a small group of wealthy individuals. Instead, he chose a different path that would spread ownership among thousands of investors while raising the capital Microsoft needed to dominate the software industry. Going public meant selling shares of Microsoft stock to anyone willing to buy them. This process, called an initial public offering or IPO, would transform Microsoft from a private company owned by Gates and a few partners into a public corporation owned by shareholders across America and beyond. The preparation took months of intense work. Microsoft's executives spent countless hours with investment bankers, lawyers, and accountants. They had to prove that Microsoft wasn't just successful today, but would remain profitable for years to come. Every financial detail was scrutinized, every business strategy questioned, and every risk carefully documented. Gates himself traveled across the country in what Wall Street called a roadshow. He stood before rooms full of potential investors, explaining why Microsoft represented the future of computing. His presentations were precise and confident, backed by impressive sales figures and ambitious plans for new software products. On March 13, 1986, Microsoft's stock began trading on the NASDAQ exchange at $21 per share. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Investors recognized the potential of personal computing and wanted to own a piece of the company that seemed destined to lead this revolution. By the end of the first trading day, Microsoft's stock price had jumped to $35.50. This wasn't just good news for new investors. It created instant wealth for anyone who already owned Microsoft stock. Gates, who retained the largest ownership stake, became worth hundreds of millions of dollars on paper. The IPO raised $61 million for Microsoft, providing the company with resources to expand globally and develop more ambitious software projects. But the real value lay in Microsoft's new status as a public company. Major corporations now viewed Microsoft as a serious partner, not just another startup. Top talent wanted to work for a company whose stock options could make them wealthy. The transformation wasn't just financial. As a public company, Microsoft had to report its performance every 3 months and answer to shareholders. This accountability pushed the company to maintain consistent growth and profitability, creating a culture of achievement that would drive Microsoft's success throughout the following decades. The IPO marked Microsoft's graduation from promising startup to industry leader, setting the stage for even greater ambitions in the rapidly expanding world of personal computing. Part 5. The Windows Phenomenon. The money and credibility from the public offering gave Microsoft the resources it needed for its next big gamble. Bill Gates and his team had been working on something that would change how people thought about computers forever. They called it Windows 3.0, and when it launched in May 1990, it transformed Microsoft from a successful software company into the dominant force in personal computing. Before Windows 3.0, most people found computers intimidating. You had to type commands in MS-DOS, remembering exact words and syntax. One wrong letter meant starting over. Gates watched Apple's Macintosh gain attention with its point-and-click interface and knew Microsoft needed to respond. But he wanted to do more than just copy Apple. He wanted to make graphical computing available to everyone, not just those who could afford expensive Apple machines. The development of Windows 3.0 pushed Microsoft's engineers to their limits. They worked 18-hour days, sleeping under their desks when deadlines approached. The software had to run on existing PC hardware while providing the smooth graphical experience people expected. This meant performing technical magic, squeezing advanced features from machines that were never designed for such tasks. When Windows 3.0 finally shipped, the response exceeded everyone's expectations. Microsoft sold over 3 million copies in the first year. Computer stores couldn't keep the boxes on their shelves. People who had never touched a computer before were suddenly buying PCs just to experience Windows. The software made computing feel approachable. Instead of memorizing commands, users could see their options displayed as pictures and menus. But Gates had an even bigger vision brewing. While Windows 3.0 gained momentum, Microsoft began developing what would become Windows 95. This project consumed the company's best minds for years. They redesigned everything from the ground up, creating features that seem obvious today but were revolutionary then. The Start button, the taskbar, plug-and-play hardware installation, these innovations emerged from countless meetings and coding sessions. Microsoft's marketing for Windows 95 became legendary. The company spent $300 million promoting the launch, more than most movies' entire budgets. Television commercials featured the Rolling Stones song Start Me Up, perfectly capturing the excitement of beginning something new. Retail stores stayed open past midnight for the launch, treating software like a blockbuster movie premiere. The August 1995 launch day created scenes never before witnessed in computing. Lines formed outside computer stores. People camped overnight to buy the first copies. News programs covered the launch like a major cultural event. Within 4 days, Microsoft sold 1 million copies. Within 2 months, that number reached 7 million. Windows 95 didn't just succeed commercially. It fundamentally changed how people related to computers. Suddenly, regular families were buying PCs for their homes. Small businesses discovered they could afford powerful computing tools. Schools began teaching children using Windows machines. The software became the bridge between complex technology and everyday users. This success positioned Microsoft as more than a software company. They had become the gatekeepers of digital experience for millions of people worldwide. Every day, users depended on Microsoft's vision of how computing should work, setting the stage for even greater influence in the years ahead. Chapter 3: Dominance and Descent, the Age of Empire. Part 1: Productivity Rules, Office Suite Revolution. In the late 1980s, Microsoft faced a puzzle that would reshape how the world worked. The company had created powerful individual programs, Word for writing documents, Excel for number crunching, and PowerPoint for presentations. Each program sold separately, but users found themselves constantly switching between different software tools to complete their daily tasks. Bill Gates and his team recognized something important. People didn't want to buy 3 separate programs and learn 3 different interfaces. They wanted tools that worked together smoothly. The solution seemed obvious in hindsight, But at the time, it was revolutionary. Bundle everything together into one package called Microsoft Office. The first Office suite launched in 1989 for Apple computers, then came to Windows in 1990. The bundle cost less than buying each program individually, making it an instant hit with businesses and home users alike. But the real magic happened when Microsoft made the programs talk to each other. Users could copy a chart from Excel directly into a Word document, or include both in a PowerPoint presentation without losing formatting or functionality. This integration created what Microsoft called a productivity ecosystem. Once someone learned to use Word, picking up Excel felt familiar because the menus and commands worked similarly. Companies found their employees could share files easily, collaborate on projects, and maintain consistent formatting across all their documents. The business world transformed almost overnight. Secretaries who once used typewriters became document designers. Accountants moved beyond calculators to create complex financial models. Sales teams replaced overhead projectors with polished digital presentations. Office didn't just change how people worked, it changed what kinds of work seemed possible. Microsoft's marketing strategy proved brilliant. They offered deep discounts to businesses buying multiple licenses, making Office cheaper than competitors' individual programs. They also struck deals with computer manufacturers to pre-install Office on new machines, ensuring millions of users encountered Microsoft's tools as their first experience with productivity software. By the mid-1990s, Office had become the standard. Other software companies struggled to compete because users didn't want to learn new interfaces when Office already did everything they needed. The suite generated billions in revenue and created a loyal customer base that upgraded reliably every few years. The Office revolution established a pattern Microsoft would repeat throughout its history: create individual products, then integrate them into an ecosystem that became harder to leave than to join. This strategy transformed Microsoft from a software company into the foundation of modern business productivity, setting the stage for even greater ambitions as the company prepared to face new challenges from regulators who worried about its growing power. Part 2. Antitrust Storm: Rivalries and the Government's Gaze. By the late 1990s, Microsoft had become so powerful that even the U.S. government started paying attention. The company's Windows operating system ran on nearly every personal computer, and Office dominated business software. But this success came with a price that Bill Gates never expected to pay. The trouble began when competitors complained that Microsoft was playing unfair. The company had a habit of bundling new software with Windows, making it nearly impossible for rivals to compete. When Netscape created the first popular web browser, Microsoft responded by including Internet Explorer free with Windows. This move crushed Netscape's business model overnight, since most people wouldn't pay for software they already had. In 1998, the Department of Justice filed a massive antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft. The government argued that the company was using its Windows monopoly to destroy competition in other markets. Gates initially dismissed the case as government interference with innovation, but the legal battle would consume the next several years of his life. The trial became a public spectacle. Gates himself took the witness stand, where his combative responses and apparent memory lapses about key events made headlines. When prosecutors showed him emails where he discussed crushing competitors, Gates claimed he couldn't remember writing them. His performance damaged both his personal reputation and Microsoft's public image. Federal Judge Thomas Penfield Jackson wasn't impressed. In 2000, he ruled that Microsoft had indeed violated antitrust laws by maintaining its Windows monopoly through anti-competitive practices. The judge's proposed remedy was dramatic: split Microsoft into two separate companies, one for operating systems and another for software applications. The ruling sent shockwaves through the technology industry. Microsoft's stock price plummeted, and employees worried about their futures. Gates faced the possibility of seeing his life's work dismantled by government order. The company immediately appealed the decision, launching another round of legal battles. During this period, Microsoft's business practices came under intense scrutiny. Internal emails revealed executives discussing strategies to cut off Netscape's air supply and other aggressive tactics. The company's reputation shifted from innovative pioneer to corporate bully in the eyes of many customers and industry observers. The legal pressure forced Microsoft to change how it operated. The company became more cautious about bundling products and started working more cooperatively with competitors. These changes affected everything from product development to marketing strategies, as lawyers now reviewed decisions that previously would have been made purely on business grounds. By 2001, a new presidential administration brought fresh perspectives to the case. The Bush administration proved more willing to negotiate than to pursue the breakup remedy. Microsoft eventually reached a settlement that required the company to share technical information with competitors and submit to ongoing government oversight. The antitrust battle fundamentally changed Microsoft's relationship with the technology industry and the public. While the company avoided being broken apart, it emerged from the trials as a more regulated and watched entity, setting the stage for new challenges in an increasingly competitive digital landscape. Part 3. Competing on New Frontiers, Internet and Gaming. As the antitrust settlement dust settled, Microsoft faced a rapidly changing digital world that demanded bold new strategies. The Internet had transformed from a curiosity into an essential force, and Bill Gates knew his company needed to act fast or risk being left behind. The first major battlefield emerged with web browsers. Netscape had claimed early dominance with Navigator, controlling how millions of people experienced the Internet. Microsoft saw this as an existential threat. If Netscape controlled the gateway to the web, it could potentially make Windows irrelevant. Gates assembled a team to create Internet Explorer, and the company made a decisive move that would define its Internet strategy. Microsoft bundled Internet Explorer directly into Windows, making it free and readily available to every PC user. This approach sparked fierce competition with Netscape, who charged for their browser. The strategy proved devastatingly effective. Within a few years, Internet Explorer had captured the majority of the browser market, essentially pushing Netscape to the sidelines. But the Internet was just one frontier. Microsoft spotted another emerging opportunity in home entertainment. The gaming industry was growing rapidly, dominated by companies like Sony and Nintendo. These weren't traditional technology companies, yet they were selling millions of sophisticated devices into homes worldwide. The Xbox project began as an internal rebellion of sorts. A group of Microsoft engineers believed the company could build a gaming console that would serve as a digital hub for the living room. The idea faced significant internal resistance. Many executives questioned whether Microsoft should venture so far from its core software business. Bill Gates eventually backed the Xbox initiative, recognizing its potential to extend Microsoft's reach into entertainment and establish a foothold in the living room. The development process proved incredibly challenging. Building gaming hardware required entirely different expertise than creating software. Microsoft had to establish relationships with game developers, compete for exclusive titles, and enter retail channels where it had little experience. The original Xbox launched in 2001, entering a market where Sony's PlayStation 2 was already gaining momentum. Microsoft lost money on every console sold, a deliberate strategy to build market share and establish the Xbox brand. The company invested heavily in exclusive games like Halo, which became a defining title that justified the console's existence. These ventures into browsers and gaming represented more than simple product expansions. They showed Microsoft's willingness to fight for control over emerging technologies that could threaten its core business. Both Internet Explorer and Xbox required massive investments with uncertain returns, but they demonstrated the company's determination to remain relevant as technology evolved. The success of Internet Explorer strengthened Microsoft's grip on personal computing, while Xbox established the company as a serious player in entertainment. These strategic moves created new revenue streams and defensive positions, but they also brought fresh challenges and competitors that would test Microsoft's adaptability in ways the company had never experienced. Part 4. Leadership Transitions, Gates to Ballmer. By the early 2000s, Bill Gates faced a choice that would reshape Microsoft forever. The company he had built from a small software startup now dominated personal computing, but the demands of running such a massive operation were pulling him away from what he loved most, creating new technology. Gates had always been the architect, the visionary who could see where technology was heading next. Now he found himself spending more time in boardrooms than in front of computers. The pressure was immense. Antitrust battles had drained energy and resources. New competitors were emerging from every direction. The internet had changed everything about how people used computers, and mobile devices were beginning to hint at a future that might not revolve around Windows. Gates knew Microsoft needed leadership that could focus entirely on operations while he concentrated on technology strategy. Steve Ballmer had been Gates's right-hand man for over 2 decades. Where Gates was quiet and analytical, Ballmer was loud and passionate. He could energize a room full of employees with his enthusiasm, shouting about sales targets and market opportunities until everyone felt ready to conquer the world. Ballmer understood numbers, he understood business, and most importantly, he understood Microsoft's culture from the inside. The transition began gradually in 2000 when Gates stepped down as CEO, but remained as chairman and chief software architect. This wasn't a sudden departure, but a carefully planned shift that recognized both men's strengths. Gates could return to working on product vision and new technologies, while Ballmer took control of day-to-day operations and strategic execution. Ballmer brought a different energy to Microsoft's leadership. He was a salesman at heart, someone who believed that passion and determination could overcome any obstacle. His famous presentations became legendary for their intensity, with Ballmer jumping around the stage, sweating through his shirt, and pumping his fists while talking about Windows and Office. This wasn't Gates' measured, technical approach, but something entirely new. The challenges Ballmer inherited were enormous. Google was rising as a serious threat, offering free services that competed directly with Microsoft's profitable software. Apple was beginning its remarkable comeback under Steve Jobs, creating products that made Windows look clunky and outdated. The entire technology industry was shifting towards services and away from the packaged software that had made Microsoft rich. Ballmer responded by pushing Microsoft to think bigger and move faster. He invested heavily in search technology to compete with Google, launched new versions of Windows and Office with improved features, and expanded Microsoft's presence in enterprise software and services. His approach was to fight on every front, using Microsoft's size and resources to overwhelm competitors through sheer determination and market presence. This leadership change marked the end of Microsoft's founding era and the beginning of something new. The company would face its greatest challenges yet, but it would face them with a leader who believed absolutely in Microsoft's ability to adapt and win. Part 5. Surviving the Millennium Bug and Market Changes. As 1999 approached its final months, businesses worldwide held their breath. The year 2000 problem, known as Y2K, threatened to cripple computer systems that might interpret 00 as 1900 instead of 2000. For Microsoft, this crisis presented both a massive challenge and an opportunity to prove its worth when the world needed it most. Steve Ballmer's energetic leadership style proved perfect for this moment of crisis. While other companies scrambled in panic, Microsoft organized massive task forces to test every line of code in Windows and Office. Engineers worked around the clock, methodically checking date functions and calendar calculations. The company established Y2K command centers that operated like military operations, with status boards tracking progress across thousands of software components. Microsoft's response went far beyond fixing its own products. The company created free diagnostic tools that businesses could download to test their systems. Customer support teams answered millions of calls from worried users, walking them through updates and patches. Microsoft published detailed compatibility guides and hosted webinars explaining which versions of Windows and Office were Y2K ready. This comprehensive approach transformed a potential disaster into a demonstration of Microsoft's reliability and customer commitment. The months leading to January 1, 2000, revealed changing market dynamics that would reshape the technology industry. Internet companies were attracting massive investments, while traditional software companies faced questions about their future relevance. Microsoft found itself defending not just against the Y2K threat, but against a new generation of competitors who claimed the web would make desktop software obsolete. Ballmer responded by accelerating Microsoft's internet strategy while strengthening its core products. The company rushed to release Windows 2000, a business-focused operating system designed to handle enterprise networks and internet connectivity seamlessly. Meanwhile, Office 2000 introduced web publishing features that allowed users to create websites directly from Word and Excel. These products demonstrated that Microsoft could evolve with the internet rather than be replaced by it. When midnight struck on January 1, 2000, Microsoft's preparations paid off dramatically. While some systems experienced minor glitches worldwide, Microsoft's software performed remarkably well. The feared digital apocalypse never materialized, and Microsoft emerged with enhanced credibility. The company had proven it could handle a global crisis while continuing to innovate and adapt to market changes. The Y2K experience taught Microsoft valuable lessons about crisis management and customer communication that would serve it well in future challenges. More importantly, it demonstrated that even as technology evolved rapidly, there was still enormous value in reliable, well-supported software that businesses could depend on when everything was at stake. This successful navigation of the Millennium transition positioned Microsoft to face the next wave of challenges with confidence, even as new competitors like Google began to emerge with radically different approaches to software and services. Chapter 4: Reinvention in the Digital Age. Part 1: Entering the Cloud, Azure and New Opportunities. The world changed fast in the early 2000s, and Microsoft found itself in an uncomfortable position. While the company still dominated personal computers, powerful new rivals were reshaping how people thought about technology. Google was making everything searchable and free. Amazon was selling books online and quietly building something much bigger behind the scenes. Apple was creating sleek devices that made Microsoft's products look clunky and outdated. The real wake-up call came when these competitors started talking about the cloud. Instead of installing software on individual computers, they promised users could access everything through the internet. Amazon had already built massive data centers to handle their own online shopping demands. Then they realized other companies might pay to use that same computing power. Amazon Web Services launched in 2006, offering businesses the chance to rent computer storage and processing power by the hour. Microsoft's executives watched nervously as more companies chose Amazon's cloud services over Microsoft's traditional server software. The writing was on the wall. Businesses wanted flexibility. They wanted to pay for what they used, not buy expensive software licenses up front. They wanted someone else to worry about maintaining servers and handling security updates. Ray Ozzie, Microsoft's chief software architect, became the internal champion for cloud computing. He had previously created Lotus Notes, so he understood how businesses communicated and collaborated. Ozzie wrote passionate memos to Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, explaining that Microsoft needed to move fast or risk losing relevance entirely. The company's first cloud attempts were modest. Windows Live offered web-based email and photo sharing, but these consumer services missed the bigger opportunity. The real money was in helping businesses move their operations online. Amazon was already earning billions by renting computing power to startups and established companies alike. Microsoft's breakthrough came with Azure, announced in 2008. The name itself suggested something light and airy, floating above the constraints of physical hardware. But building Azure required enormous investments. Microsoft had to construct data centers around the world, hire thousands of engineers, and redesign their software from the ground up. The Azure team faced skepticism from within Microsoft. Many employees had built careers selling traditional software licenses. Cloud computing threatened their expertise and potentially their jobs. Some customers also resisted, worried about storing sensitive data on someone else's computers. But Azure offered something compelling. Small startups could launch websites without buying expensive servers. Large corporations could expand globally without building data centers in every country. Software developers could focus on creating applications instead of managing infrastructure. The transformation took years to show results. Microsoft had to retrain salespeople, rewrite software, and convince customers to trust their most important data to the cloud. But gradually, Azure began generating serious revenue. By 2010, major companies were running critical business applications on Microsoft's cloud platform. This shift represented more than just a new product line. Microsoft was reinventing itself from a software company into a service provider. Instead of selling products once, they could earn recurring revenue from ongoing subscriptions. The cloud gave Microsoft a fighting chance against Google, Amazon, and Apple in the battle for the future of computing. Part 2. From software to services, the subscription model. The cloud breakthrough had proven Microsoft could evolve beyond traditional software sales, but the company faced an even bigger challenge. How could they transform their most beloved products without alienating millions of loyal customers? The answer would reshape not just Microsoft, but the entire software industry. Steve Ballmer and his team recognized a harsh reality in 2010. Customers were growing tired of buying expensive software packages every few years. Meanwhile, pirates copied Microsoft Office freely across the internet. The old model was bleeding money and losing relevance. Young workers preferred free web-based alternatives like Google Docs. Something had to change, and fast. The solution seemed risky at first. Instead of selling Office for hundreds of dollars up front, Microsoft would rent it monthly for a much smaller fee. Customers would always have the latest version, automatic updates, and cloud storage included. But this meant convincing people to pay forever instead of owning their software outright. Internal resistance was fierce. Sales teams worried about explaining the new model to confused customers. Finance departments struggled to predict revenue streams. Engineers had to completely rethink how they built software. Instead of releasing major updates every 3 years, they would need to deliver improvements constantly. The pressure was immense. Microsoft launched Office 365 in 2011 with careful messaging. They emphasized convenience over ownership. No more installing from disks or losing files when computers crashed. Everything would sync seamlessly across devices. Workers could access their documents from anywhere with internet access. The pitch resonated with businesses tired of managing software installations and updates. Early adoption was slow but steady. Small businesses appreciated predictable monthly costs instead of large upfront investments. IT departments loved automatic security updates and centralized management tools. College students could afford professional software for the first time. Each satisfied customer became a reliable source of recurring revenue. The transformation required painful adjustments throughout Microsoft. Traditional sales quotas became meaningless when customers paid gradually over time. Customer service teams handled different problems as users expected immediate fixes for subscription services. Product managers focused on user engagement metrics rather than just sales numbers. By 2013, the subscription model was generating serious momentum. Office 365 subscribers grew from thousands to millions. Monthly revenue streams provided financial stability during economic uncertainty. Microsoft could invest in long-term improvements without worrying about quarterly sales spikes. The predictable income allowed better planning and innovation. Competitors scrambled to copy Microsoft's approach. Adobe switched Photoshop to subscriptions. Salesforce expanded their cloud offerings. Even Apple began emphasizing services over hardware sales. Microsoft had started an industry-wide transformation that would define modern software business. The subscription revolution proved Microsoft could reinvent core products while maintaining customer loyalty. This success provided crucial momentum as the company prepared for its next major leap, expanding into entirely new markets through strategic acquisitions that would connect millions of professionals worldwide. Part 3. Gaming grows, acquisitions, and the rise of Xbox. Microsoft's subscription revolution created steady cash flow that freed the company to take bigger risks. With predictable monthly income streaming in, executives could think beyond quarterly earnings reports. This financial stability became the foundation for Microsoft's most ambitious expansion yet, conquering the entertainment industry through gaming. The original Xbox had proven Microsoft could build hardware that competed with Sony and Nintendo. But success in gaming required more than good consoles. Players wanted exclusive games they couldn't find anywhere else. Microsoft's leaders realized they needed to own the studios creating those must-have titles. The acquisition spree began quietly. Microsoft purchased small studios with promising talent and unique ideas. Each purchase taught them valuable lessons about managing creative teams. Game developers operated differently than software engineers. They needed artistic freedom while meeting strict deadlines. Microsoft learned to provide resources without stifling creativity. As confidence grew, so did the size of their targets. The company bought established studios with proven track records. These acquisitions brought beloved game franchises under Microsoft's control. Players who wanted to continue their favorite series had to buy Xbox consoles. This strategy slowly shifted the balance of power in gaming. Each new console generation raised the stakes higher. Sony's PlayStation dominated global sales, while Nintendo carved out family-friendly territory. Microsoft needed something different. They focused on online gaming and digital distribution before competitors fully grasped these trends. Xbox Live connected players worldwide, creating social experiences that kept people engaged between game releases. The business model evolved rapidly. Physical game sales still mattered, but digital downloads grew exponentially. Microsoft built robust online stores that delivered games instantly. They experimented with subscription services that offered unlimited access to game libraries. Players loved the convenience and value. Studios under Microsoft's umbrella flourished with bigger budgets and broader distribution. Talented developers could focus on creating amazing games without worrying about marketing or retail relationships. Microsoft handled the business side, while studios concentrated on what they did best. Gaming revenues climbed steadily, eventually rivaling traditional software sales. What started as an experimental venture became a core business segment. Microsoft's stock price reflected this transformation as investors recognized gaming's massive profit potential. The cultural impact extended beyond financial metrics. Gaming attracted younger customers who might never have considered Microsoft products otherwise. These players grew up with Xbox controllers in their hands, developing brand loyalty that influenced their future technology choices. Competition intensified as rivals recognized gaming's importance. Sony invested heavily in exclusive content. Nintendo innovated with unique hardware concepts. Microsoft responded by doubling down on acquisitions and technological advancement. This gaming expansion positioned Microsoft perfectly for their next phase. The same strategies that worked in entertainment could apply to professional networks and developer communities. The company had learned how to acquire, integrate, and grow specialized businesses while maintaining their unique cultures. Part 4. Satya Nadella's Vision, Culture and Innovation. The transformation began on a February morning in 2014 when Satya Nadella walked into Microsoft's headquarters as the new CEO. The company that had once dominated personal computing now faced an uncertain future. Smartphones and tablets were reshaping how people worked. Cloud computing was changing where businesses stored their data. Microsoft's culture had grown rigid and competitive, with departments working against each other instead of together. Nadella brought a different perspective. Born in India and trained as an engineer, he had spent over 20 years at Microsoft, but approached leadership differently than his predecessors. Where previous leaders had focused on crushing competitors, Nadella talked about empathy and collaboration. He believed Microsoft's greatest strength lay not in controlling technology, but in empowering others to achieve more. The cultural shift started immediately. Nadella began hosting town halls, where employees could ask tough questions. He encouraged teams to admit mistakes and learn from failures. The company's famous stack ranking system, which forced managers to rate a percentage of employees as poor performers, disappeared. Instead of competing internally, teams started sharing resources and ideas. This openness extended beyond Microsoft's walls. Under previous leadership, the company had viewed competitors as enemies. Nadella surprised the tech world by demonstrating Office running on an iPad at his first major presentation. Microsoft began partnering with former rivals like Apple and Google. The message was clear. Microsoft would go where customers needed them, regardless of platform. The cloud became central to everything. Nadella had led Azure's early development and understood its potential. he redirected massive resources toward cloud services, betting Microsoft's future on helping businesses move their operations online. This meant cannibalizing profitable software sales for uncertain subscription revenue, a risky gamble many questioned. Engineering teams received new priorities. Instead of building products that worked only with other Microsoft tools, they created services that connected everywhere. Developers gained freedom to experiment with new technologies. The company started releasing software updates continuously rather than waiting years between versions. Employee morale improved dramatically. Surveys showed workers felt more motivated and proud of their company. Top talent stopped leaving for competitors. New graduates began choosing Microsoft over Silicon Valley startups. The change was visible in how people spoke about their work, describing collaboration where they once complained about politics. Nadella's approach attracted different kinds of partnerships. Technology companies that had avoided Microsoft now sought integration opportunities. Startups wanted to build on Azure rather than competing platforms. Enterprise customers appreciated Microsoft's new willingness to support mixed technology environments. The stock market responded positively. Share prices began climbing as investors recognized Microsoft's renewed energy and clearer direction. Revenue from cloud services grew rapidly, offsetting declining traditional software sales. This cultural renaissance prepared Microsoft for its next major moves. The same collaborative spirit that transformed internal operations would soon drive ambitious acquisitions, bringing entirely new communities into Microsoft's expanding ecosystem. Part 5. Strategic Acquisitions, LinkedIn, GitHub, and beyond. The collaborative spirit that energized Microsoft's workforce soon extended to bold acquisition strategies. Satya Nadella understood that buying established platforms could accelerate growth faster than building from scratch. In 2016, Microsoft stunned the business world by purchasing LinkedIn for $26.2 billion, the company's largest acquisition ever. LinkedIn brought 400 million professional users into Microsoft's ecosystem. The social networking platform seemed like an unusual choice for a technology company focused on productivity software. However, Nadella saw deeper connections. Office workers already managed contacts, scheduled meetings, and shared documents. LinkedIn added relationship management and professional networking to this daily workflow. The integration happened gradually and thoughtfully. Microsoft avoided forcing changes that might alienate LinkedIn's user base. Instead, the companies found natural connection points. LinkedIn profiles began appearing in Outlook email conversations. Sales teams could research prospects directly from their productivity tools. Recruiters gained access to candidate information without switching between applications. 2 years later, Microsoft surprised the developer community by acquiring GitHub for $7.5 billion. This purchase initially worried programmers who remembered Microsoft's historical hostility toward open-source software. Many developers threatened to abandon the platform entirely. Nadella's team moved carefully to preserve GitHub's independence and culture. They promised to maintain the platform's commitment to open-source projects. Microsoft's own development teams began contributing more code to public repositories, demonstrating genuine commitment to collaborative programming. The GitHub acquisition proved strategically brilliant. Developers represent the future of every industry as software becomes central to business operations. By supporting the tools programmers love, Microsoft positioned itself as an ally rather than an adversary. Cloud services naturally followed as developers needed infrastructure to run their applications. These major acquisitions established a pattern. Microsoft began targeting communities and platforms that connected to its core business without competing directly. Minecraft's purchase had already demonstrated this approach in gaming. Each acquisition brought new users who might eventually need cloud services, productivity software, or enterprise solutions. The strategy reflected Nadella's understanding of how modern technology companies grow. Rather than building every capability internally, successful firms create ecosystems that attract users across multiple touchpoints. LinkedIn users might discover teams for collaboration. GitHub developers could deploy applications on Azure. Gaming enthusiasts might subscribe to Office for personal productivity. Financial results validated this approach. LinkedIn's revenue grew consistently after joining Microsoft, reaching billions annually. GitHub's user base expanded rather than contracted despite initial skepticism. Both platforms strengthened Microsoft's relationships with distinct professional communities. These acquisitions represented more than financial investments. They demonstrated Microsoft's evolution from a software company to a platform company. The goal became connecting different types of users within integrated experiences rather than selling standalone products. This shift would define Microsoft's competitive strategy for years ahead, as the company sought to build bridges between increasingly diverse digital communities and their expanding technological ecosystem. Chapter 5: Microsoft in the Age of Intelligence. Part 1: The AI Revolution, from Copilot to Cloud. By 2022, Microsoft faced a pivotal moment. The company had mastered cloud computing and transformed into a services giant, but a new frontier beckoned. Artificial intelligence promised to reshape how humans worked, created, and interacted with technology. Microsoft's leaders recognized this wasn't just another trend. It was the next fundamental shift in computing. The partnership with OpenAI became the catalyst for everything that followed. While other tech giants pursued AI research in isolation, Microsoft chose collaboration. Sam Altman's team at OpenAI had created GPT models that could understand and generate human-like text with remarkable accuracy. Microsoft saw potential beyond impressive demos. They envisioned AI woven into every aspect of their software ecosystem. The first breakthrough came with GitHub Copilot. Programmers worldwide suddenly had an AI assistant that could write code alongside them. Developers typed comments describing what they wanted, and Copilot suggested entire functions. The tool learned from millions of code repositories, offering solutions that saved hours of work. Early adopters were amazed and sometimes unsettled by how well the AI understood their intentions. Microsoft didn't stop with developer tools. They recognized that AI's true power lay in making everyone more productive. The company began integrating AI capabilities directly into Office 365, now called Microsoft 365. Writers could ask AI to draft emails or summarize lengthy documents. Analysts could generate charts and insights from raw data with simple prompts. Designers could create presentations with AI-generated images and layouts. The transformation accelerated when Microsoft launched Copilot for Microsoft 365. This wasn't just another feature. It was a new way of working. Users could ask natural language questions and receive intelligent responses. The AI could analyze email patterns, suggest meeting agendas, and even write first drafts of complex reports. For many workers, it felt like having a brilliant assistant who never slept. Azure, Microsoft's cloud platform, became the foundation for this AI revolution. The company invested billions in specialized chips and data centers optimized for AI workloads. Businesses could now build their own AI applications using Microsoft's infrastructure and tools. Small startups gained access to the same powerful AI capabilities that previously required massive resources. The results exceeded expectations. Productivity increased measurably across organizations using AI-powered tools. Creative professionals found they could focus on higher-level thinking while AI handled routine tasks. Customer service teams resolved issues faster with AI assistants analyzing problems and suggesting solutions. Critics raised valid concerns about job displacement and over-reliance on AI. Microsoft responded by positioning AI as augmentation rather than replacement. Their marketing emphasized AI for everyone, showing how the technology could enhance human capabilities rather than eliminate them. This AI integration marked Microsoft's boldest bet since the shift to cloud computing. The company wagered that artificial intelligence would become as essential as the internet itself. Early indicators suggested their gamble was paying off, setting the stage for even more ambitious technological leaps ahead. Part 2: Quantum Leaps, Pioneering Future Technologies. While the world watched Microsoft master artificial intelligence, the company's researchers were already working on something far more ambitious. Deep in laboratories in Santa Barbara and around the world, scientists were tackling a challenge that could make today's most powerful computers look like pocket calculators. They were building a quantum computer. Quantum computing sounds like science fiction, but Microsoft was making it reality. Unlike regular computers that use bits storing information as ones or zeros, Quantum computers use quantum bits that can be both 1 and 0 at the same time. This strange property means quantum computers could solve certain problems millions of times faster than any computer today. The challenge was enormous. Quantum systems are incredibly fragile. They operate at temperatures colder than outer space, and the slightest vibration can destroy their delicate quantum states. Most early quantum computers worked for only seconds before errors crept in. Microsoft knew they needed a different approach. Their secret weapon was something called the Majorana particle. Named after an Italian physicist, these exotic particles could protect quantum information from errors naturally. Microsoft scientists spent years trying to create and control these particles in tiny wires thinner than human hair. Progress was slow and expensive, with each breakthrough taking months of careful work. Why chase such a difficult goal? The applications were staggering. Quantum computers could discover new medicines by simulating molecular interactions that would take classical computers centuries to calculate. They could crack current encryption systems, but also create unbreakable new ones. They could optimize complex logistics problems, predict weather with perfect accuracy, and solve puzzles in physics that have stumped scientists for decades. Microsoft faced tough choices. Quantum research consumed hundreds of millions of dollars with no guaranteed payoff. Some investors questioned spending so much on technology that might not work for decades. Meanwhile, competitors like IBM and Google were taking different approaches, sometimes achieving impressive demonstrations that made headlines. But Microsoft played the long game. They built partnerships with universities worldwide, sharing research while keeping their most promising discoveries protected. They created development tools so programmers could write quantum software even before the hardware was ready. They offered cloud access to early quantum machines, letting researchers experiment without building their own systems. The work required patience that few companies could afford. Experiments often failed after months of preparation. Promising leads turned into dead ends. Yet each failure taught valuable lessons that brought the team closer to their goal. By 2024, Microsoft's quantum team had achieved several important milestones. They created some of the most stable quantum systems ever built. Their cloud platform let thousands of researchers explore quantum algorithms. Most importantly, they were closing in on logical qubits that could run calculations reliably. This quantum quest represented Microsoft's boldest bet on the future. While AI was transforming the present, quantum computing could revolutionize everything from medicine to cybersecurity. The company that once dominated personal computers was now racing to control the next fundamental shift in computing power. Part 3: Sustainability and Social Responsibility. As Microsoft reached new heights in quantum computing and artificial intelligence, a different kind of transformation was taking shape within the company. The same leadership team that pushed boundaries in technology began asking harder questions about their role in the world. What did it mean to be one of the most powerful companies on Earth? How could they use that influence responsibly? The awakening came gradually, then all at once. Climate scientists were sounding urgent alarms about global warming. Social movements demanded greater equality and representation. Customers, employees, and investors started measuring companies not just by profits but by their impact on society and the planet. Microsoft faced a choice that would define its character for decades to come. In 2020, Microsoft made a bold promise that shocked the business world. The company committed to becoming carbon negative by 2030. This wasn't just about reducing emissions. Microsoft would actually remove more carbon from the atmosphere than it produced. By 2050, they pledged to eliminate all the carbon the company had ever emitted since its founding in 1975. Brad Smith, Microsoft's president, became the face of this environmental crusade. He understood that big promises required big changes. The company invested billions in renewable energy projects. They redesigned data centers to run more efficiently. Every new building had to meet strict environmental standards. Microsoft even created an internal carbon tax, charging each division for the pollution it created. The sustainability push changed how Microsoft built products. Xbox consoles became more energy efficient. Azure data centers ran on wind and solar power. The company developed new software to help other businesses track and reduce their own carbon footprints. Environmental responsibility became part of every major decision. But Microsoft's transformation went beyond climate action. The company looked hard at its own workforce and found troubling gaps. Women and minorities remained underrepresented, especially in leadership roles. This wasn't just about fairness. Microsoft realized diverse teams built better products and made smarter decisions. Under CEO Satya Nadella's guidance, Microsoft launched comprehensive diversity programs. They changed hiring practices, expanded partnerships with historically black colleges, and tied executive bonuses to diversity goals. The company invested in communities often overlooked by the tech industry, funding computer science education in underserved schools and supporting minority-owned businesses. These weren't just feel-good initiatives. Microsoft discovered that sustainability and social responsibility actually strengthened the business. Customers preferred working with companies that shared their values. Top talent wanted to join organizations making positive change. Investors rewarded businesses planning for long-term challenges rather than just quarterly profits. The integration of social responsibility into Microsoft's core strategy represented a fundamental shift. The company that once focused solely on software dominance now saw itself as a global citizen with obligations beyond shareholders. This transformation would influence every major decision as Microsoft continued growing into one of the world's most valuable companies. Part 4. Reaching New Heights, the $4 trillion milestone. The numbers on Wall Street tell a story that would have seemed impossible just decades earlier. On a crisp morning in early 2024, Microsoft's stock price climbed past a threshold that made financial history. The company's market value crossed $4 trillion, placing it among an exclusive group of the world's most valuable enterprises. This achievement didn't happen overnight. The foundation had been building through years of strategic decisions that transformed Microsoft from a software company into a technology powerhouse. The cloud business, Azure, had become the engine driving this growth. Companies around the world were moving their operations to Microsoft's servers, paying monthly fees that created steady, predictable revenue streams. The artificial intelligence boom added rocket fuel to this ascent. Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI had positioned the company at the center of the AI revolution. Every business wanted AI capabilities, and Microsoft offered them integrated across its entire product suite. From Excel spreadsheets that could analyze data automatically to Teams meetings that generated perfect summaries, AI features were everywhere. Investors watched these developments with growing excitement. Microsoft's quarterly earnings reports consistently beat expectations. Revenue from cloud services grew by double digits every quarter. The AI products were attracting new customers and convincing existing ones to pay premium prices. The company's profit margins expanded as digital services scaled efficiently across millions of users. Wall Street analysts began revising their price targets upward. The traditional software business model had been replaced by something far more valuable. Instead of selling software once, Microsoft now collected subscription fees from hundreds of millions of users every month. This recurring revenue model provided visibility and stability that investors prized. The $4 trillion milestone represented more than just financial success. It demonstrated Microsoft's complete transformation under Satya Nadella's leadership. The company that had once struggled to stay relevant in the mobile era had reinvented itself as the essential infrastructure for the digital economy. Other technology giants took notice. The competition for AI talent intensified as everyone tried to match Microsoft's advantage. Startups found it harder to compete when Microsoft could integrate AI across its entire ecosystem. Enterprise customers increasingly viewed Microsoft as their primary technology partner, rather than just another vendor. This market position created a virtuous cycle. Higher valuations made it easier to attract top talent and fund ambitious research projects. The stock's performance rewarded employees with substantial wealth, reducing turnover and maintaining momentum. Microsoft's ability to invest billions in emerging technologies like quantum computing became a competitive advantage in itself. The implications extended beyond Microsoft's headquarters in Redmond. The company's success validated the cloud-first strategy that had seemed risky years earlier. It proved that established technology companies could reinvent themselves and reclaim leadership positions. Most importantly, it showed how the integration of AI and cloud computing could create value at unprecedented scales, setting the stage for even greater transformations ahead. Part 5. The Next 50 Years: Legacy, Vision, and Unfinished Stories. Microsoft's extraordinary rise to a $4 trillion valuation marked more than just a financial achievement. It represented the culmination of 5 decades of continuous transformation, from a small software startup to one of the most influential technology companies in human history. Yet even as shareholders celebrated this historic milestone, Satya Nadella and his leadership team knew this was not an endpoint, but a launching pad for the next chapter. Standing at this pinnacle, Microsoft possessed something rarer than market dominance: institutional knowledge spanning generations of technological revolution. The company that once struggled to understand the internet had successfully reinvented itself for the cloud era and positioned itself at the forefront of artificial intelligence. This track record of adaptation became its greatest asset as new challenges emerged on the horizon. The integration of AI into everyday work transformed how millions of people approached their jobs. Copilot's ability to write code, generate presentations, and analyze data fundamentally changed productivity expectations. But this was only the beginning. As quantum computing research progressed and new interfaces between humans and machines developed, Microsoft found itself architecting the foundation for technologies that wouldn't fully mature for another decade. Climate commitments created both pressure and opportunity. The company's pledge to be carbon negative by 2030 required reimagining data centers, supply chains, and product life cycles. These environmental goals drove innovation in unexpected directions, from underwater data centers to AI systems that optimized energy consumption across entire cities. The financial investment was massive, but it positioned Microsoft as a leader in sustainable technology development. The social responsibility initiatives that once seemed like corporate obligations became competitive advantages. Diverse teams produced better products. Accessibility features opened new markets. Community partnerships created goodwill that translated into business opportunities. Microsoft discovered that doing good and doing well were not opposing forces but complementary strategies. Looking ahead, the questions facing Microsoft mirror those confronting society itself. How should AI be regulated? What happens when quantum computers can break current encryption methods? How can technology reduce inequality rather than increase it? The company's responses to these challenges would define not just its next 50 years, but its role in shaping human progress. The teenagers learning to code today will retire in the 2070s. The problems they solve and the tools they create will determine whether Microsoft remains relevant in that distant future. The company's greatest accomplishment may not be reaching $4 trillion in value, but maintaining the curiosity, adaptability, and bold vision that got it there. As the celebration of past achievements faded, the real work of building the next 50 years had only just begun.